The following podcast is not meant for children or for liberals, even though that's pretty much the same thing these days, but that's what we're here for. Somebody's got to keep these brats in line. Anyway, you've been warned. It's the right opinion.
These days, our media's either incompetent or malevolent. They don't believe in heaven, but they acting like they heaven sent. Knowing the truth is way harder than telling it. We gotta work harder, gotta be more intelligent. Sometimes we just gotta grab a mic and start yelling shit. We're living in times when it's hard to stay relevant. Be the elephant in the room, in a room full of elephants. Be the elephant in the room, in a room full of elephants. Boom.
Welcome back to The Right Opinion, right here on TheRightOpinion.podbean.com, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, HackerHamin.podbean.com, and RatSaladReview.com. Those of you who aren't already subscribed to all of those platforms, particularly HackerHamin and Rat Salad Review, you guys want to tune in over there. Rat Salad Review, I apparently will be doing a debate about my stance on modern gender theory. That episode tickled a few of those gentlemen the wrong way, and they want to have a nice discussion about it. It's going to be a 2-on-1 from what I understand, but frankly, it's still not fair for them. Anyway, I will have plenty to talk about on that front as that gets arranged and we have the debate. I believe it'll be exclusive to RatSaladReview.com, and I will obviously point you in that direction when that time comes. But neither here nor there at the moment. This week, well, I mean, first and foremost, it's Independence Day coming up tomorrow as of the day of this recording. So happy 4th of July to all of you people. Go out and celebrate your independence, grill some burgers, have a couple beers, but more importantly, let's not forget the fine men and women who laid down their lives in order for us to enjoy the freedoms that are only provided by the United States of America. That is the most important theme for the weekend, but more importantly than that, well, not more importantly than that, that's the most important thing. And then I said more importantly than that. Listen to me. Sometimes I just ramble and words just come out. But that was a bit of a faceplant on my end, which is appropriate because we are going to be covering leftist media faceplants. And my God, just the last week or two alone have really given me all the fuel I could conceivably need. And when we are talking about leftist idiots, and when we are talking about more specifically leftist idiots faceplanting, that brings me none other to my favorite Stephen Colbert without glasses, Rachel Maddow. And here she is talking about the jobs numbers, which just dropped yesterday, as I believe July 2nd, 2020. So just to give you some context, Rachel Maddow put this quote out the night before the jobs reports came out. We will listen to Miss Maddow, and then I will tell you just how absurd what she said was at the time and how much more absurd it proved to be when the jobs numbers actually came out. So, lazy drag Stephen Colbert, take it away.
We're actually going to get the jobless numbers, the unemployment numbers for the month of June a day earlier than we would otherwise expect them. So we would usually get those on a Friday. They're going to come out tomorrow. That'll tell us unemployment figures for June. Brace yourself. It's going to be absolutely terrible.
Well, I mean, before I even get into the actual figures here, let's take a look at what Rachel Maddow is doing here. The jobless numbers, not the jobs numbers, the jobless numbers, because Rachel Maddow is trying to get you to look at life through a glass that is half empty, right? That she wants you to think everything is bad, even when it doesn't necessarily seem bad. It's going to be bad. Now, no rational, sane human being thought that there were going to be absolutely terrible jobs numbers coming out in June. No one, not a soul on planet Earth, thought this. As a matter of fact, let's pull up this article here from BusinessInsider.com. Somebody over there who probably knows a little bit more about business than Rachel Maddow, whose ratings continue to tank. Neither here nor there. The jobs report released Thursday from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed that the economy added 4.8 million payrolls during the month and that unemployment declined to 11.1%. Now, 11.1% unemployment, not good. But considering where we were, much better. Mind you, when Rachel Maddow made that statement, what she was saying was not in any way in alignment with anybody who knows anything about economics. Zero people thought that the jobs numbers were going to be absolutely terrible. And when you look at it on its face, we had about 15 to 20 million people, close to 30 million people at points, that had lost their jobs. And now that we're reopening, a lot of those jobs are now available again, and people are taking them because they need jobs. Funny how that works. But not only was Miss Maddow woefully incorrect, she wasn't even woefully incorrect. I defy her to find a single study that would have said that the jobs numbers were going to be, quote, absolutely terrible in June. Because I'm looking at this BusinessInsider.com report here, and it reads, and I quote, "The June report also marks the second month in a row that non-farm payrolls have exceeded economists' expectations, showing just how swiftly the U.S. economy has recovered since starting the reopening process. Economists had expected," let me repeat that again, economists had expected 3 million jobs added, and the unemployment rate to decline to 12.5% in June. Pause. Does any of that sound absolutely terrible? Because that's what economists expected. Now, clearly, Rachel Maddow, in all of her glassless glory, and she's not wearing her glasses here, it's very weird, she obviously knows more about the economy than economists, right? Well, turns out that was incorrect. Continuing in the article, in May, economists expecting a dismal report were shocked when the U.S. added a revised 2.7 million jobs and saw the unemployment rate declined to 13.3% from 14.7%. So we were at 14.7, came down to 13.3 in May, and then it was expected to come down to 12.5% in June, but it actually came down to 11.1% in June because Rachel Maddow doesn't know dick about shit. And that's actually putting it nicely. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on. What else do we have here? I'm going to the paper notes this week. Oh, Russian Bountygate. Oh my, do the leftist faceplants continue. So there was this big story that came out, right? It was a huge story about how apparently there was intelligence that Russians were paying members of the Taliban to target U.S. soldiers abroad, and that Donald Trump was doing absolutely nothing about it, even after being briefed on it. Well, first and foremost, he wasn't briefed on it because the information was never actually verified. As many people who actually know how these things work have said, is that the information would need to be verified in order for it to ever actually make it into the president's daily brief. You don't want the president of the United States making decisions based on what ifs. You wanted the president of the United States making a decision based on facts. So this never made it into the presidential daily brief by all accounts that are willing to put their names on the record. Notice how the anonymous sources are always the ones that say Trump is doing evil things, but the people who actually work in and around the White House are not. They're the ones that actually get in front of a microphone, they show their face, we know their names, they put their reputations on the line, and they make the claim that Donald Trump was never briefed on this. So who are you to believe? Some ghost in the fucking machine? Or Kayleigh McEnany, who is the press secretary and is actually aware of what's going on in and around the White House? Now, granted, press secretaries are kind of propagandists, right? By nature, that's just their deal. They're trying to spin stuff for the president. Anybody who has put their name to this has stated that the president was not briefed on this. Furthermore, let's just take a step back and look at how absurd the story is to begin with. First and foremost, do you think the Taliban need any added motivation for killing Americans? You think they were sitting around like trying to work out a peace treaty and be all buddy-buddy with the United States of America? Maybe some of the leadership was, but certainly the foot soldiers are very anti-American just based on the ideologies that we know that they hold. But the idea that the Taliban needed motivation to go out of their way to attack the United States, rather silly on its face. This is, of course, the Death to America crowd. I don't think they need a few rubles from old Vlad in order to be motivated to shoot American soldiers. Mind you, if this is going on, it has apparently been going on for a long, long time, as in long before the Trump administration got into office, which would mean that yeah, it was going on perhaps under George W. Bush and definitely under Barack Obama, and neither of them took any strong action against it either. Barack Obama was too busy helping his buddy Hillary Clinton get information from Russians and then pushing it onto his FBI and DOJ like it was legitimate, and then, Logan acts and spying on campaigns and three-star generals and all of that good stuff. So the idea that the Obama administration was tough on Russia when they were trying to actively reset relations with Russia, and Obama was caught on camera saying to, I believe it was Dmitry Medvedev, one of Putin's higher-end advisors, that I'll have more flexibility after the election. And as I mentioned, he sat back and either let the Russians meddle in the election if his FBI and DOJ weren't complicit in the Russians' interference in the 2016 election. But we're supposed to believe Barack Obama was this real tough on Russia guy. People ask, what did I do when I found out that Russia was interfering in our elections? I went over there, I waved a finger in Vladimir Putin's face, and I said, you cut that out. And then I did the thing that Uncle Joey does on Full House. Cut it out. Meanwhile, I was told by valuable and reliable sources like Rachel Maddow that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are best buds. This is clearly, my God, this is a friendship falling apart before our very eyes. Best buddies in the world, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, are now having a military conflict because Vladimir Putin, despite the fact that he loves Donald Trump, according to the mainstream media, is paying Taliban soldiers to target American soldiers. Does that make any sense to anybody? I thought they were friends. If they're friends, why is it that Putin is paying people to kill our soldiers? I was under the impression that they are in lockstep trying to take over the world together. No? Doesn't quite square with you? That's because you still have a functioning brain, which means that you're clearly not the front runner for the presidency for the Democratic Party right now. Moving on from there, because the Russia Bountygate thing is just ridiculous. The notion that Donald Trump was just sitting back and not doing anything about it. Here's the real of that situation, is that the intelligence came in. It was not verified, although it was dispersed amongst higher-end intelligence officials in and around the military. It never quite made it to the president's desk, but just because it was unverified and it never made it to the president's desk does not mean that our military on the ground in Afghanistan wasn't aware and at least conscious of this fact, and they were acting in accordance with protecting our men and women in uniform. That's what actually happened, but they will tell you Putin is trying to kill American soldiers via the Taliban, and President Trump, his best buddy, is just sitting back and letting it happen. Because apparently they think this relationship is like a one-way thing, I guess. I don't know, maybe Putin is the master, Trump is the slave. I'm sure that's what they would think, but literally everything that's gone on in the world since Donald Trump has taken office has pretty much ran to the contrary there, not to mention the fact that, there was a whole Mueller report that clearly stated that no member of the Trump campaign had conspired or in any way coordinated with the Russian government in order to meddle in the 2016 election. But don't let that stop Rachel Maddow. Speaking of Rachel Maddow, let's go to equally ridiculous face planting going on the pages of Buzzfeed. Buzzfeed reports that protests haven't caused a spike in COVID cases. First and foremost, I don't believe you! And I don't even need to look into it any further than that. Honestly, first and foremost, if this was a legitimate scientific study, it most certainly would not have debuted in Buzzfeed. Secondly, if that is true, let's assume that's true, then it sounds like we've all been locked down for no reason, because every major city in the country was filled with thousands of people in the streets, many of which now wearing masks, none of which socially distancing, and yet there was no spike in COVID cases as a result of those protests. Well, it sounds like we've all been cooped up inside for no reason whatsoever. There are actually now studies that are suggesting that people who are staying inside are more likely to get this because you're basically in kind of like a closed loop air system. You're not getting as much vitamin D. You're not getting as much UV light. You're not exposed to other potential things that could make you sick. So your immune system is more compromised. There are studies that are coming out that are suggesting that the lockdowns have not only been not helpful, but have possibly been harmful. But all that aside, BuzzFeed is telling us that these protests/riots, I threw the riots in there, are not the cause of these spikes in the COVID cases. Well, I don't know how they ascertain that information, because It's been reported widely that contact tracers across the country have been told explicitly not to ask anybody whom they may be testing whether or not they were at a protest. So it'd be pretty hard to tell. Also, let's take a look at a state like California that has been locked down with the exception of the protests that have gone on. Everything else has been locked down, pretty much. It's been as strict a lockdown as it's been anywhere else in the country up to this point. The only mass gatherings that took place in California were the protests. And sure enough, California, despite the lockdowns, and probably because of the protests, have seen a spike in cases. So how do you square that? If everybody's been socially distancing and wearing masks and inside, how is there a spike in cases in California if not for the protests? All right, so let's get rid of the protests for a second here. I personally think that the spike in cases is due to more testing, which you can see. You can go online and you could see the number of tests administered in the United States every day, and you could see that it is quite clearly going up almost daily, but most definitely on like a 7-day average. You could see the tests are increasing and increasing and increasing, which would mean that we are going to get more positive tests back. Also, let's also note that the media has shifted from deaths and even from hospitalizations to cases, because that's the biggest, scariest number they can throw at you right now, and they have no interest in telling you the truth. They just want you to be as scared as humanly possible. See Rachel Maddow's assessment of the job numbers and the the jobless numbers, because glass half empty. But let's also take into consideration that a lot of these cases that are coming out are in younger people who have statistically no worse a chance of dying from this than they do of the common cold. As a matter of fact, statistically speaking, if you're if you're 30 or younger, you're statistically more likely to die driving home from work than you are of dying from COVID-19. And also worth note is that because there is a lot of rises in cases amongst younger people, that can be directly drawn to the protests, to some of the reopening efforts. And let's also note that older people aren't getting it because they're smart enough to stay home because they know that they're the ones in danger. If only that was how we handled this from the beginning, we could have protected the old people, could have protected the immunocompromised, could have protected the nursing homes, and our death rate would be drastically lower than it is. The idea that the United States, as on a federal level, has failed here is just beyond ignorant. The massive losses of life that have all occurred because of decisions made on the state level, particularly ones like allowing the protests and sending sick people into nursing homes. That is what's causing spreads, and that is what will eventually cause more deaths. But let's not let logic get in the way of the Buzzfeed scientific discovery. Then we got an article that came out this week from the Washington Post. Headline reads, Trump keeps claiming that the most dangerous city in America are all run by Democrats. They aren't. Author Philip Bump. And then in the actual article itself, a faceplant, so faceplanty, it's actually sprouting roots. The article reads, and I quote, most of the current mayors of these cities are Democrats. 2 of the mayors of cities with the most reported violent crimes overall, though, are independents, both of which are left-leaning, by the way. We're talking about San Antonio and Las Vegas. Back to the article. Though are independents, and the mayor of Jacksonville, Florida, is a Republican. So 1 of the 20 cities with the most overall crime, 1 of those mayors is a Republican, and that's in Jacksonville, Florida. This is debunking Donald Trump's claim that most dangerous cities in America are all run by Democrats. Furthermore, it gets even worse as they show a chart a little bit lower on in the article itself that shows the crime per capita. I wish I was making this up, but literally every city on this chart is Democratic, has a Democratic mayor, rather, except for Springfield, Missouri, who is an independent and most undoubtedly left-leaning. So let's look at the list here. Memphis, Tennessee, St. Louis, Detroit, Baltimore, Springfield, Missouri, Little Rock, Arkansas, Stockton, California, Cleveland, Ohio, San Bernardino, California, Oakland, California, New Orleans, Albuquerque, South Bend, Indiana, shout-outs to Mayor Pete, Milwaukee, Fucking Mayor Pete is on this fucking place is on this list. I'm sorry. Anyway, I mean, this guy was a serious presidential candidate at one point. It's hilarious. After that, Milwaukee, where the DNC will be holding its convention, or at least it would in a timeline that didn't involve COVID. Rockford, Illinois, Lansing, Michigan, North Las Vegas, Nevada, Wichita, Kansas, Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Houston, which strangely enough has a Democratic mayor, which is sort of weird. But these are the most violent cities per capita in the country, and all of them are run by lefties. Nope. All right. By liberals. Lefties, you're giving Southpaws a bad name there. Liberals. Liberal mayors run every one of the major crime cities in this country. And the guy, Philip Bump, who wrote this at the Washington Post, thought this was owning Donald Trump. Trump says all of the major Democratic cities that have all this major crime are all run by Democrats. Well, he's wrong 2.5% of the time. You can't make this shit up. This guy wrote this article and was like, I'm going to get Trump. I'm going to prove him wrong. I'm going to fact check this notion that Democrats run all of the most dangerous cities in America. And then he actually put together the data and the chart, which, by the way, is entirely blue. You would think even at just glancing at it, he was going to go, that's probably not a good look for my hypothesis, but it's the Washington Post. No one actually cares about facts anyway. I'll just write the headline and no one will actually read the article, which is probably true in a lot of cases. But here we are. We read the article, and what a doozy it was. It is only going to make things more hilarious moving forward as they continue to perpetuate this lie that Trump is wrong about this, because they're going to say, oh, the Washington Post did a fact check on that, and it turns out that Donald Trump is wrong. Not all of the major cities that have the most crime have mayors that are Democratic. It's just 95% of them. They'll mean it too. It's hilarious. Anyway, moving on from there, Tim Kaine, you may remember him. He was Hillary Clinton's vice presidential nominee. This guy was almost the vice president in the United States. By popular vote, he would have been. Thank God for the Electoral College. Tim Kaine says America invented slavery. No, there's no punchline there. Tim Kaine says America invented slavery. Just going to let you stew on that one for a minute. I mean, my immediate thought is obviously slavery existed all around the world. It existed long before people got to this continent. There's some Jews from ancient Egypt that would like to say hello, Mr. Kaine. Obviously, that was part of the American experiment, though, right? Because the 1619 Project doesn't really go far back enough in history to really encapsulate all that is the American ideal. We need to go all the way back to ancient Egypt, because without ancient Egypt, there's obviously no America, and there was slavery there, which means America invented slavery, according to a man who could very well have been the vice president of the United States. But then again, when you look at who Barack Obama's vice president was and where he is today, and for that matter, I mean, I don't love Mike Pence either. I really don't. I've said it before. I will say it again because I'm talking about vice presidents. Vice presidential candidates have been nothing more than assassination deterrents since the first George Bush was in office. And you may remember his vice president was Dan Quayle, who couldn't spell fucking potato. So the idea that a vice presidential candidate is like this important thing that's going to really push you over the top, really what you want to do is check a few boxes with your vice presidential candidate, preferably a swing state, preferably somebody who moderately differentiates from you on certain policies so that you can point to, look, I got somebody else in the room who doesn't always agree with me. People generally don't look at it much beyond that. That said, Joe Biden's vice presidential pick is probably the most important vice presidential pick in political campaign history, because we all know that person, if Joe Biden wins, will end up being president, if not in 4 years, but, definitely, if not in 4 years, but possibly during Joe Biden's actual first term as president, should that nightmare actually occur. But this faceplant was faceplanterific, I must say. Tim Kaine thinking that America invented slavery suggests a severe lack of historical context. Speaking of, Ryan Lizza of I believe the New York Times, CNN reporter possibly. I think it's New York Times. Ryan Lizza, he had the nerve to ask Kayleigh McEnany this week during one of the pressers if the president is upset that the South lost the Civil War. Kayleigh fired back immediately. It was like, no, you moron. She should have said that. She was like, no, he's proud of the United States of America, not the Confederate States of America, I suppose, or any divided states of America. More importantly, he is a fan of the United States, and part of that United States thing is the fact that they're united. Anyway, so Kayleigh McEnany put this guy in his place, but this stems from Rachel Maddowian levels of ignorance, right? Is that there is a group of leftist losers out there. They all seem to work in the media. Ryan Lizza being one of them, Rachel Maddow being another. And they seem to think, they are so convinced that Donald Trump is this evil racist, right? Despite the fact that they've face-planted on many attempts to try to make him out to be one, they continue to push this narrative, not because it's based on reality, but because they want you to think it's based in reality. Ryan Lizza asking this question as if there was any rational human being that thought Donald Trump is really upset that the Confederacy lost. That's why he's upset about the Stonewall Jackson statue coming down or whatever the fuck. Sheer lunacy. This is also from the same crowd of people that think that Donald Trump retweeted that video of that old guy yelling white power because he's signaling to his white power base. We are heading into a presidential election. These people know that, right? Like, Donald Trump would never, in his wildest dreams, try to put out something like that on Twitter and think that it was going to help him against Joe Biden in 2020. None. As a matter of fact, Ben Shapiro is probably 100% right on this, is that Donald Trump was probably flipping through Twitter. He saw the video. He probably didn't even have the sound on his phone. And he was flipping through and he saw a bunch of old people in golf carts with Trump signs, because that's a thing, I guess, down in Florida. Hey, Florida man is a thing for a reason. These are the retired Florida men, although many of them are not from Florida, neither here nor there at the moment. So he sees this guy supporting Trump. He's riding around in circles in the villages down there. He's got a Trump sign on there. And for that matter, the guy, from what I can tell in the video, does not appear to actually be a white supremacist. He is being mocked by people on the side of the road yelling at him, "Where's your hood? Where's your Klan hood?" Because these people are from the Rachel Maddow school of everyone I don't like is racist, and they assume that their fellow village residents are racist for supporting Donald Trump. And the guy sarcastically yells back at him, "White power," which is not a good look. And Donald Trump should not be retweeting it, obviously. But the notion that Donald Trump put that out there. I mean, look, the guy's on Twitter every day. He's in front of a microphone every day. If he really wanted to espouse white power, all he would have to do is get in front of a microphone and be like, "White power," and everyone would be like, "Ah!" And apparently he would win re-election, because supposedly this is a great campaign strategy, because people who, like Ryan Lizza and Rachel Maddow, are so blind to the facts that they are so willing to just bend reality to their worldview, and they think that Donald Trump this wasn't a dog whistle, it was a megaphone. No one, by the way, hears more dog whistles about racism than the left, which seems sort of weird, because usually the only people who can hear dog whistles aren't people, they're dogs. So, there is that. Then, oh my God, you know what? I've been talking about hydroxychloroquine and whether or not I was going to touch on it for a long time now. It's kind of, you know what? It's really been in flux, which has been part of the reason that I haven't jumped on it. That, and obviously with the riots and the protests and all that sort of stuff, the COVID narrative kind of fell by the wayside for a little while. But I just so happened to see an article today that was being posted, of course, by all the right-wingers. I think I saw Mark Levin retweet it, and it was from CNN.com in yet another faceplant. Let's call this a medical faceplant, if you will. CNN Health reports, headline, study finds hydroxychloroquine may have helped coronavirus patients survive better, by Maggie Fox, Andrea Kaine, and Elizabeth Cohen of CNN. CNN reports, a surprising new study found that the controversial anti-malarial drug hydroxychloroquine helped patients better survive in the hospital. Just stop right there. Again, just think about this from their worldview. This is only surprising to them because they've ignored all the science and done everything they can to throw dirt on this particular drug for no other reason other than the fact that the president was touting it and they don't want him to be right about anything. We've always joked that if Donald Trump cured cancer, they would start reporting about how great cancer is. Donald Trump may have found a therapeutic that helps treat COVID-19, and they did everything they could to tell you what a terrible idea was. More importantly, they told you the drug would kill you, which is really strange because it was a widely used drug prior to COVID-19, but now, because Donald Trump is touting it, it's deadly for some reason. A team at Henry Ford Health System in Southeast Michigan said Thursday its study of 2,541 hospitalized patients found that those given hydroxychloroquine were much less likely to die. Weird, because I was told they're much more likely to die. Anyway, Dr. Marcus Servos, division head of infectious disease for Henry Ford Health System. Henry Ford, Nazi sympathizer, though, so you got to take all this with a grain of salt. CNN didn't actually say that, but you know that's what they're thinking. Dr. Marcus Servos, division head of infectious disease for Henry Ford Health System, said 26% of those not given hydroxychloroquine died, compared to 13% of those who got the drug. The team looked back at everyone treated in the hospital system since the first patient in March. Overall, crude mortality rates were 18.1% in the entire cohort. So everybody in this particular hospital system that got COVID-19, 18.1% of them died. Contrast that with 13.5% in the hydroxychloroquine alone group. So those are people who only got hydroxychloroquine with no other treatments. Only 13.5% of them died. Now, which is something that's very weird about this article, and I will say this is contra to all of the research that I had seen up to this point, but I'm actually willing to listen to science. So here we go. 20.1% among those receiving hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin. Now, I was told that the combination, and basically all the studies that I had read, suggested that the combination was really necessary in order for you to get the best possible results. But according to what this doctor said here, Dr. Servos, in their study at the Henry Ford Health System, it was found that 13.5% of people who got hydroxychloroquine alone died, whereas 20.1% of those receiving hydroxychloroquine plus azithromycin died. So it's a big increase if you add the azithromycin in there. Now, a lot of people were saying at the time that azithromycin is not something you want to necessarily give to a lot of old people because it does cause some semblance of heart problems, heart palpitations. As a matter of fact, there was a doctor in New Jersey that actually replaced azithromycin with a similar, less evasive drug and was seeing spectacular results. Mind you, every doctor I've ever seen write about this says that you need to have zinc somewhere in the process. Otherwise, the hydroxychloroquine isn't getting, the maximum. But they're saying here that 13.5% of people died in the hydroxychloroquine alone group, which means those people may not have gotten zinc. They may have only gotten hydroxychloroquine, and they were better off for it. Hey, who am I to argue with science? But and then it goes on from there, 22.4% among the azithromycin alone group and 26.4% for neither drug. So if you did nothing, if you took neither drug, you had a 26.4% chance of dying, whereas if you took hydroxychloroquine alone, the likelihood is you only had a 13.5% chance of dying, or out of that particular group, 26.4% of those people died versus 13.5% of the people on HCQ exclusively. So after months of telling us how harmful this drug is, CNN, yes, that CNN, the China News Network, they even had to report that there was a study out that shows that hydroxychloroquine is actually helping. If this becomes a bigger issue down the road, I will unfurl my full research upon you, but just know right now that after months and months and months and weeks and hours and commercials and Twitter videos and YouTube and yada, 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 they have been spewing this nonsense that this drug will kill you. Now, was it ever going to be as effective as Donald Trump made it out to be? Frankly, I don't know that he made it out to be all that effective. He said it could be a game changer. He said, talk to your doctor. And then, obviously, Dr. Rick Bright, the guy, the whistleblower, that came out saying that Trump was pushing this too hard, was actually the one pushing it behind the scenes and actually ordering massive doses for the United States Reserve. They touted Dr. Bright as a hero, as a whistleblower, for outright lying about what he was actually doing behind the scenes. It turns out he was in lockstep with Donald Trump about HCQ until it became politically advantageous for him not to be, and he can get a goddamn fucking book deal and an appearance on Oprah. I don't know that any of that actually happened, but I'm assuming it's coming down the pike. That brings me to the Washington Post lady. This is one of my favorite things, maybe ever. And it's going to bring me back to definitely one of my favorite things ever. But Karen Attiah, appropriately named, she's an editor for the Washington Post, and she's a black woman, and she is a super woke one at that, apparently. However, it has been discovered that she's had a wide variety of anti-white tweets, which would otherwise be known as racist. And it's come, these tweets have circulated, and she's obviously deleting them faster than people can pull them back up. But it turns out that she's not quite as woke as she claimed to be, because after all, she is undoubtedly, based on reading some of these tweets, an anti-white racist. One of the more famous things that she was tweeting at white women was saying, "Oh, you should be lucky that we're just asking for equality and not asking for revenge." Which, quick aside here, the Black Lives Matter movement is not asking for equality. They're asking for special treatment. If, in fact, they were worried about equality, they wouldn't exist, because they already have it. Statutorily, we have had equality in this country since the 60s. We elected a black president in the early 2000s. I mean, my God, not to mention the myriad of legislation and the successful black people that have arisen in this country over that period of time since Jim Crow was disbanded and the Civil Rights Act, which was voted by largely Republicans, even though they'll never tell you that. Systemically speaking, we do not have a racial problem in this country. As a matter of fact, it could be said that blacks are actually treated better. I mean, think about all of the opportunity zones, and not to mention the entire housing crisis that occurred right around the beginning of the Obama administration, which explicitly happened because banks were basically forced to give loans to people of color, even if they were financially unviable to receive such loans. And then many of them defaulted on those loans, and that led to a burst of the housing bubble and the massive crash that came along with it. So when you go woke, you go broke, and that extends to even Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. But the idea that this Washington Post lady, I mean, obviously she's an anti-white racist, and obviously the Washington Post doesn't have any problem with that, because that's probably their stance as a wide swath anyway. But this is what killed me the most, and thank you to Jerry Dunleavy of the Washington Examiner, or the Daily Caller. I think he's Washington Examiner. Either way, Jerry Dunleavy, follow him on Twitter. He's magnificent. He's a great follow. He's a great conservative journalist out there, one of the few good journalists left. He found this particular post from Karen Attiah, executive producer or some sort of producer over at the Washington Post. The tweet reads, and I quote, "I have never felt so personally attacked by a meme. Crying laughing emoji, 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 and crying laughing emoji." Actually, no, you know what? I think those are just crying emojis. She's very upset by this meme. What is this meme, you might ask? Well, it is a meme where it's a picture, memes, a little picture on top. It says, "Me. These white men are dangerous," and it's got a picture of the Native Americans from the Disney movie Pocahontas. And then underneath it says, "Also me," and it's got a picture of Pocahontas sucking face with John Smith. So she is personally offended. She says, "I have never felt so personally attacked by a meme." Crying face emoji times 6. Why is she so offended by this meme? Well, a fellow Twitterer asked that same question, and fortunately for her, The Right Opinion was there to respond. And I quote, "Me. She's offended because it forces her," the meme that is, "to try to rationalize her disdain for white people and her attraction to white men. It's actually rather hilarious, and it is. This woman hates white people, but she is also apparently attracted to white men. A cognitive dissonance so strong that a meme, quote, personally attacked her because she was forced to deal with that rationalization in her head. Why is it that I hate white people so much, yet I can't stop sucking white dick? I don't know. It's the same question Don Lemon asks himself every night. Anyway, that was just so unbelievably hilarious, and it reminded me of possibly my favorite article in the history of articles, and I'm going to see if I can pull it up for you now, because it is my favorite article in the history of articles. And I may have posted it on here a few times before, but I will probably throw it in the show notes again. This article, of course, was written by the wonderful Corey Lane for Glamour magazine. This article was written in September 8th of 2017. The headline reads, and I shit you not, this is not the Babylon Bee, this is not The Onion, this is Glamour, which is probably on the same level of legitimacy, but this woman writes the following headline. Help! I can't stop hooking up with Trump supporters. And I read on. When someone asks about my worst hookup, I have plenty of options to choose from, but I inevitably end up telling the same story. It's the one where I started arguing with a Trump supporter at a bar, and then before I knew it, I was waking up the next morning in his bedroom. There were flags everywhere. Ronald Reagan's face was emblazoned on one of them. Don't tread on me made an appearance on another. I say it was the worst. Not because the sex was bad, but because, well, see above. I'm going to put this article in the show notes. I really encourage you all to go read this because it is the funniest article possibly ever written by any human being ever. So this woman, presumably a radical leftist, because she's upset that she can't stop hooking up with Trump supporters, hates Donald Trump, hates everything he stands for, will go out of her way to argue with people at bars about politics because she's such a rabid anti-Trumper, she can't even rationalize that there are people who support the president out and about in the real world and not just hiding behind avatars on Twitter. She then argues with this gentleman and ends up sleeping with him. And she's not upset about it because the sex was bad, because it's probably better than any of her liberal boyfriends. But she's upset because this keeps happening. It's not just that it's happened one time. It's that this keeps happening. Again, this is romantic cognitive dissonance, right? Is that she hates Trump supporters, hates the "Don't Tread on Me" flag, and hates Ronald Reagan. And yet, she keeps falling into the arms of men who check all of those boxes. Now, why isn't she off sleeping with some soy boy feminists male beta cuck? Well, that's because the sex probably wouldn't be very good. They're not very intellectually challenging. They're not very masculine in any conventional sense. And despite the fact that this woman is probably a radical leftist and probably a radical feminist, she cannot help but find that the Trump supporters are more like the real men that she wants to sleep with than her liberal male feminist colleagues. I'm sure there's a few guys walking around Glamour who read this article and were like, I've been hitting on you for months and I can't get anything? No, you can't, because you're a goddamn fucking beta male. Meanwhile, she's out meeting real men at bars, and those men are not only challenging her intellectually, but then satisfying her sexually. And this drove her so crazy that she basically wrote an article about what a fucking slut she is in Glamour magazine. Oh my God, it's just the best. It is the best. These people are the best. And then I am going to actually conclude with one more person like this, because we need all of the liberal faceplants right here on 4th of July weekend for all of your auditory enjoyment. I don't talk about my personal life very much on here, and I'm not actually going to be talking about my personal life a whole ton in this particular story either, but I do have a member of my family. Let's leave it there. She is about as much as I'll give you. She came over, and we were all hanging out at my parents' house, and a couple weekends ago, it was like one of the first nice days. Everybody was feeling a little less COVID worried, so we were having a nice barbecue. Girlfriend was there with her kid. My kid was there. Everybody was having a good old time. And this person in my family told me a story. She has a boss at her job. I'm being slow about this because I'm just trying not to give away too many details. She has a boss at her job. My family member is a young white girl. The boss in this particular situation is not an older, but a slightly less than middle-aged, successful black woman. They are quite close. They go out to lunches and stuff all the time. And they went out to lunch recently in the wake of all of these protests. Another thing worth note about my family member's African-American boss is that she is not your typical leftist. As a matter of fact, she's rather conservative. So the two of them are out to lunch. They're eating outside because that's the only place you can eat these days at a restaurant. And a middle-aged white woman walks over to their table, asks to speak with my family member's boss, and asks her how she can be an ally to her. These are people I only thought existed on Twitter. But apparently they're real, and they are out in the world, and they are actually walking up to black women and asking them how they can be their ally. One would think that you could start by not treating black women any different than any other woman or any other person. That would probably be the best way to go. But no, this super woke, super liberal, fucking, suburban housewife had nothing better to do that day, and she wanted to signal her virtue. And she approached my family member's boss and said, "How can I be an ally to you?" Well, she did not get the response she was anticipating. My family member's boss, let's just call her Jane, just for the lack of, I just want to have a name. Jane says to this privileged, uber liberal suburban housewife, she says, "Look, I'll have the conversation with you, but this ain't going to go the way you think it's going to go." And she proceeds to tell her that the best way to be an ally to black people is to shut the fuck up and leave her the fuck alone. I mean, she didn't say it quite in that rude of a sentence, but she basically told her, like, look, if you want to be an ally to black people, stop looking at us like we're different and we're weird and we need your help. We don't need your help. I don't need anyone's help. As a matter of fact, this woman, Jane, in this particular instance, my family member's boss, probably more successful, probably more educated, probably more wealthy than this woman is, who, in full disclosure, lives in a town where most of the women don't work because their husbands make enough money to where they don't need to work. So this woman, this was her job for the day, was to go out and be an uber woke leftist, and just so happened to faceplant in front of an entire restaurant as this black woman, my family member's boss, proceeded to explain to her that she just needs to go about her life and stop pretending that black people need her help on every single cause and in every single turn. Black people are more than capable of succeeding on their own. The woke white liberals that seem to think that they're not are the true racists. This is what George W. Bush, although I'm not the biggest fan of the man, he used to refer to this as the soft bigotry of low expectations, and that's precisely what it is. If you think black people need your help to succeed, you don't think highly enough of black people. And that's the bottom line, because Stone Cold said so. Or at least Harrison Bergeron did. Anyway, that's really all I got for this week, really. I want you all to have a happy 4th of July. Be safe, be smart, enjoy a burger, a real meat burger too, not one of those Beyond things. Have a beer for me. I don't drink anymore. Have one for old Harrison. Pour it out. Give me a little libation. I pour one out for my homies. Do one of those sort of things and tweet it out, and tweet me for that matter. Tweet me 4th of July stuff. Tweet me pictures of fireworks. What you guys are doing. I want to know that my audience is having an awesome Independence Day and that you are enjoying the freedoms that are provided exclusively by the United States of America and are being protected exclusively by people like myself, by people like Donald Trump, and, for that matter, people like you for listening to this and not watching Rachel Maddow. And if you're watching both and you're listening to both, by all means, hit me with your Maddow counterpoints. Again, I am more than willing to discuss anything I ever say on this podcast with absolutely anyone. I don't say these things to be controversial. They are controversial, which is precisely why I feel like they are worth talking about. I don't go out of my way to say, and as a matter of fact, I despite the fact that I hate political correctness, I really do make a concerted effort to be at least mildly politically correct on this program, because I don't want people to snip out. I don't want, like, One Day Media Matters to come for me and be like, oh, he said this, he said that. And rest assured, if this podcast ever gets big enough, they will come anyway. But I want people to be able to listen to the content of what I'm saying, not think about the biases that I might have. Certainly I have biases. It's literally on the logo of the show. It is the right opinion. You are getting the opinion from the right, which just so happens to be the correct one. But I want to come at people with facts. I want to come at people with reason. I want to come at people with logic. And if you think you can do the same and we could keep it civil, I am more than happy to discuss any topic I've ever discussed on this show with you. We can even do it on this show if you're so brave. But in order to get in touch with me, to let me know all those things, you need to follow me on social media. So that's at RightOpinionPod on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Parler, which I am getting a little bit more active on. I'm making a concerted effort. Also, check out YouTube, The Right Opinion. You can check me out over there. Most of these episodes go up in video form, even though you don't see me. It's really just the logo of the show. But if that's an easier means for you to listen, by all means, check that out. YouTube.com, and then just type in The Right Opinion. It's got my logo there. There is another Right Opinion. There are other right opinions out there for that matter, but this one is the only actually correct opinion. But neither here nor there. Email the show, therightopinion@gmail.com. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe on YouTube, I guess, and Apple Podcasts and Stitcher and Google Play and HackerHamin.podbean.com and RatSaladReview.com. That's about all I have for you fine people. God bless America and opinions. They are like assholes. Everybody's got one, but this asshole has the right opinion right here on the Right Opinion Podcast. Talk to you guys next time.
Peace. Be the elephant in the room in a room full of elephants. Be the elephant in the room in a room full of elephants. Boom.